The school hallway buzzed like a swarm of restless bees. Lockers slammed, laughter echoed, and voices collided in waves, but Emily moved through it all like a ghost. Invisible, she hugged her books close to her chest, eyes fixed on the worn floor tiles. No one noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly as she passed groups of students who joked and shoved, their smiles bright and careless. They talked over her, around her, as if she didn't exist. Why don't they see me? She thought, the ache swelling inside her chest. The weight of silence pressed down like an invisible shroud. A group nearby burst into laughter. Emily caught a glimpse, friends sharing secrets, making plans. She forced a small, polite smile, but it felt hollow. She longed to join them, to be heard. She walked past a locker where a boy called out to his friends, "Did you see Emily today? She's like a shadow or something." The word stung, but no one around even blinked. "Just a shadow," she whispered in her mind, the loneliness wrapping tighter. She wanted to scream, to shout, but her voice felt trapped, buried beneath layers of invisible walls. Her footsteps echoed softly as she slipped into the empty art room, her sanctuary. Here, no one could see her. No one could hear the quiet battles raging inside. She touched the canvas stacked in the corner. The rough texture promised a place for her voice. Maybe here, her silence would turn into something loud enough to be noticed. Outside, the school carried on, a blur of noise and faces that didn't look her way. But inside Emily, a tiny spark flickered, fragile yet fierce. One day, she thought, they'll see me. Not just the quiet girl in the background, but who I really am. The bell rang. The hallways flooded again. Emily took a deep breath and stepped forward. Invisible today, but not forever. Emily closed her locker, the clang of metal swallowed by the bustling hall. The noise faded as she walked, a world peeling away with every step toward the quiet corner of the library. Here, the chatter was soft, almost a whisper, and the shelves of books stood like silent sentinels guarding her secret. She pulled out her worn journal, edges frayed from months of clutching, and settled into the small nook beneath the tall window. The light spilled in, soft and forgiving, casting shadows that danced gently across the pages. The world outside moved fast, but here, time slowed. Her pen hovered over the blank page, trembling with the weight of unspoken words. The words inside her head tumbled, chaotic and fierce, fears, hopes, dreams too fragile to voice aloud. If only I could say this out loud, she thought. But no one would listen. Not really. So she wrote. Her pen scratched rhythms of pain and hope, weaving a language only she understood. In the silence, I find my voice, whispered between lines no one reads. Her breath caught as she formed the words, a quiet defiance rising. Each verse was a lifeline, a way to wrestle her loneliness into meaning. The anger at being invisible, the ache of unspoken dreams, the fragile hope that someday she'd be heard. The library faded away. The noise, the teasing, the loneliness, they melted behind the ink-stained pages. Her poem grew, a fragile bird flapping its wings, trembling with the desire to fly free. She paused, fingers gripping the notebook tight. The words held power more than she'd dared imagine. A deep breath. This is me. Even if no one hears, these words exist. A sudden noise startled her, a book sliding off a shelf nearby. Emily's heart hammered. She glanced up, meeting the curious eyes of a boy. He smiled softly, nodding at her journal. "You write?" he whispered, like it was the most precious secret. She blinked. For a moment, the walls cracked. "Yeah," she whispered back, voice barely audible. He smiled again and walked away, leaving behind a flicker of connection, proof that maybe, just maybe, her voice wasn't as silent as she thought. The afternoon light shifted, shadows lengthening, but Emily's world had changed. She had found a way to speak, not with her voice, but with her soul. And in the quiet sanctuary of words, she was no longer invisible. The school announcement crackled over the loudspeaker, slicing through the hum of chatter and locker slams. Attention, students. This Friday marks the annual poetry contest. All are welcome to submit their work. Winners will be featured in the school magazine and invited to perform at the assembly. The words hung in the air, rippling through the crowded halls. Some students cheered, others rolled their eyes. But for Emily, standing near the back, the announcement landed like a whispered invitation, fragile, fragile as glass. Her heart quickened. A chance. A terrifying chance. She clutched her notebook tighter, fingertips trembling. The thought of standing before the school, of voices turning toward her, sent a cold rush through her spine. What if they laugh? The doubt clawed at her throat. What if my words aren't enough? Yet beneath the fear, something stirred, a flicker of hope, tiny but stubborn. She remembered the quiet moments in the library, where her poem grew from whispers to roars inside her chest. Could those words find a way out? Could she risk stepping into the light, leaving the shadows behind? The hall swirled with movement around her, but Emily felt suspended, caught between silence and a new possibility. A voice broke her reverie. "Hey, Emily, you entering?" A classmate, Sarah, smiled warmly, her eyes kind. Emily blinked, caught off guard. I don't know," she stammered, voice barely a whisper. Sarah nodded, understanding more than words. "You should. Your poems are amazing." Emily's breath hitched. "Really?" Sarah shrugged. "Yeah, you've got something no one else has." For a heartbeat, the crushing weight of invisibility lifted. The world shifted, just a little. Emily closed her eyes, the soft scratch of pen against paper filling her mind. She imagined the stage, the bright lights, the expectant faces. Her hands steadied. "Yes," she said, voice stronger now. "I'll enter." The hallway seemed to hold its breath. This was more than a contest. It was the first step. The house lay silent beneath a sky draped in ink. Outside, the world had gone to sleep, but inside Emily's room, the night was alive with whispered words. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light over her desk, where a battered notebook lay open, waiting. The soft scratch of pen against paper was the only sound. Steady, defiant. Emily's fingers trembled slightly, but they didn't stop. Each word poured out like a breath held too long, sharp, fragile, urgent. "They see a ghost, but I am a storm waiting to break." Her eyes flicked up toward the dark window, where shadows stretched like silent watchers. The silence of the day pressed heavy on her chest. The teasing glances, the empty seats beside her in class, the quiet she'd been forced into. But here, in the hush of midnight, she was no longer invisible. The words were hers. Powerful, real. Her breath caught. She read the line aloud, barely above a whisper. "I am not just silence. I am the voice behind the stillness." A small smile cracked her lips. This was her rebellion, her quiet resistance. With every verse, she chipped away at the walls built around her, the doubt, the loneliness, the fear. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Outside, the moon traced silver paths across the sky. Inside, Emily's heart beat steady with growing strength. The page filled. Ideas tangled and untangled, pain, hope, dreams, woven with the fragile threads of courage. Her hand paused. She looked at the lines she'd written, imperfect, raw, alive. This was more than words. It was proof. Proof she existed. Proof she mattered. She closed the notebook gently, holding it close for a moment. The night deepened, but Emily's world was brighter. She wasn't just a quiet girl anymore. She was a voice, waiting, ready, and unstoppable. Emily's fingers trembled as she clutched the folded page in her hands. The hall was packed, every seat filled, every eye fixed on the stage where she now stood, spotlight sharp and unforgiving. Her heart pounded in her chest like a relentless drum, echoing in her ears louder than the hushed whispers of the crowd. "You can do this," she told herself, one word at a time. Her voice was barely a whisper at first, cracking like fragile glass. I wrote a poem." She swallowed hard, cheeks burning. The words seemed to hover in the air, fragile and small. Then, slowly, she breathed deep, steadied herself. "This is my story." The hall grew still. The usual rustle of restless students and shifting chairs vanished like a tide pulled away. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed to hold its place in time. Emily unfolded the page, eyes flickering with the courage she had only found in the quiet moments before dawn. She began to read. "They see a ghost in the crowd, a shadow fading into silence, but I am the storm beneath the calm." Her voice caught once, then steadied, gaining strength like a rising wind. Invisible lines traced on broken glass, a map of all the things they never asked. Her words wrapped around the room, soft but sharp, a tapestry of pain and hope woven with raw honesty. She saw faces, skeptical at first, soften, eyes widen. Teachers, classmates, strangers, all caught in the spell of her truth. "I am the voice behind the silence, the echo of all the dreams denied. In this quiet, I scream louder than thunder, and I will not be unseen." The final lines lingered, a weight that settled deep into every soul present. A breathless pause followed, then a single clap, then another. The applause swelled like a wave, breaking through the years of invisibility that had shackled her. Emily's chest rose and fell, the fierce beating of her spirit unmasked for all to see. Her hands, once shaky, were now steady, steady with the fire of a girl who had dared to speak, dared to be seen. The world had shifted. This was her breakthrough, her moment of recognition. Her art, had transformed doubt into awe. And in that electric silence after her voice faded, Emily knew she was no longer just the quiet girl. She was heard. She was seen. She was unbreakable. The hallways felt different now. The usual noise, loud laughter, hurried footsteps, slamming lockers, had shifted. It was quieter, not empty, but filled with something new. A buzz, electric and tentative, like a secret spreading just beneath the surface. Emily walked through the corridors, her footsteps steady but cautious. Faces turned, not with sneers or indifference, but with something unfamiliar, curiosity. Whispered words followed her like a soft breeze, just beyond reach. She was incredible. Did you hear her poem? So raw, so real. She's not just the quiet girl anymore. Emily's chest tightened, not with fear, but with a fragile hope she hadn't dared to feel before. They're talking about me, not behind my back, but about me. Like I'm real. At her locker, a voice broke through the murmur. "Hey, Emily," a classmate said, eyes wide but warm. "That poem, it got me. You spoke for a lot of us." Emily blinked, the words sinking in like sunlight through clouds. "Thank you," she whispered. Nearby, two teachers exchanged a glance, one nodding slowly. "She's got something," the older professor murmured. "We've overlooked her far too long." A group of students clustered around a bulletin board, debating the poem's lines, quoting phrases Emily had breathed into life just hours ago. "The part about the storm beneath the calm, that hit me hard," one said. She's changing how we see things. I think she's changing us." Emily passed them quietly, feeling the warmth of their words settle in her bones. But it wasn't just admiration. It was something deeper, a shift in perspective, a breaking down of invisible walls. People who once ignored her now saw a spark, a light they couldn't deny. In the library, a shy student approached her. "I never knew you wrote," they said, voice trembling. "Could you help me with my poems sometime?" Emily's lips curved into a tentative smile. "Of course." Later, alone in the classroom, she touched the page where her poem still rested. This is only the beginning, she thought. Because now, the whispers were turning to conversations. Conversations that would change the quiet corners of the school, one voice at a time. She had sparked a ripple, a wave that would reach far beyond herself. And Emily knew she was ready to ride it. The hallways that once hummed with quiet curiosity now buzzed with whispers, but not all of them kind. Emily felt at the moment she stepped into school, eyes narrowing, conversations trailing off. The subtle shift was unmistakable. "Who does she think she is?" a voice hissed as she passed by, sharp and cold. Emily froze for a heartbeat. She swallowed hard, keeping her gaze low. But the words pierced deeper than she expected. "They say her poem was just luck, a one-time thing. Bet she had help. Probably plagiarized." The doubt was a shadow stalking her every step, growing heavier with each passing day. In class, a professor's eyes flicked away when Emily raised her hand, dismissing her as if she still belonged in the background. "Why won't they see me?" The thought thundered inside her, loud and relentless. In the cafeteria, the whispers turned into thinly veiled insults. "She's just a quiet kid who got lucky. She'll never make it." Not really. Emily sat alone, her lunch untouched, her heart tightening. The silence around her screamed louder than ever. Later, in the empty art room, she stared at the crumpled note shoved into her locker. "Stick to what you know. Poetry isn't for you." Her hands trembled. The words were knives sharp, deliberate. A test, a challenge. Is this who I am now? She wondered. The girl everyone doubts? Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. She clenched her fists. No, she would not let the shadows win. In the quiet of the room, she pulled out her notebook, the one she carried everywhere. Her fingers traced the edges of her poems, her truth, the stories she'd hidden away, the feelings she bottled up. They don't believe in me, but I have to believe in myself. That night, alone in her room, Emily read her poem aloud. Her voice was steady but fierce. "I am not invisible, not just a whisper in the noise. I am the storm, the fire, and I will burn through the doubt." Her reflection in the mirror was not the same girl who had stood trembling on stage. It was someone new, stronger, ready. The next day, Emily walked into school differently. Not because the whispers stopped, but because she no longer needed them to define her. Some doubted, some resented. But Emily was unstoppable. Emily's footsteps echoed softly down the hall, the weight of the whispers still pressing against her like a storm waiting to break. But something had shifted. A subtle warmth threaded through the coldness, fragile yet unmistakable. She didn't see it at first. The glance from a girl in her English class, quick and almost shy. The nod from the librarian, who slipped a book onto her desk, Poets Who Changed the World. The small smile from Mr. Rivera, the art teacher, who caught her eye during class and gave a thumbs up. It was quiet at first, almost invisible, but then the notes began. "Hey, your poem, it really moved me. Can we talk? Don't listen to them. You've got a voice that matters. Want to join our poetry club? We meet after school." Emily's heart thudded. Invitations? Encouragement? It felt like sunlight breaking through a long winter. She found herself in the school's dusty old library, surrounded by students who scribbled verses in worn notebooks, eyes bright with shared passion. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. "We're here because words saved us," whispered Lila, a senior with paint-splattered hands and a fierce grin. "Your poem? It gave me the courage to write again." Mr. Rivera's art room became a refuge. Walls covered in murals and sketches, colors swirling like wild dreams made real. "You have to see yourself as the artist you are," he told her, setting a fresh canvas on the easel. "The world will catch up eventually." Emily's fingers trembled as she accepted a worn notebook from a student who had barely spoken before. "I write too," he said softly. "Maybe we could share sometime." With each small act, the fortress of isolation cracked open. Her voice, once swallowed by silence, grew stronger. Hope bloomed in places she hadn't dared to look. In the quiet moments between classes, Emily found herself laughing, sharing thoughts, dreaming aloud. She was becoming part of something bigger, a community that saw not just the quiet girl, but the fierce spirit beneath. And for the first time, Emily believed she could keep walking forward. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Emily stood before the cracked classroom door, her heart pounding like a drumbeat in the quiet morning. This was no longer the girl who trembled in the shadows. This was a leader, and today, she was about to claim her space. "Welcome to the first meeting of the Willowbrook Poetry Club," Emily's voice rang out, steady and clear. The small group of students gathered before her, faces unfamiliar and curious, leaned in. Her hands did not shake. "Not anymore. This is a place where your voice matters," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "Where your truth can be heard. Not just whispered, but shouted, written, spoken, lived." One by one, the students began to share. Hesitant at first, then bold as courage sparked like wildfire. A boy with restless eyes recited a poem about pain and hope. A girl with braided hair spoke about breaking free from silence. Each voice carried a fragment of themselves, fragile, fierce. Emily watched, heart swelling with something fierce and new: purpose. She remembered the days she'd stayed invisible, swallowed by doubt, the nights of silent tears, clutching her notebook close. But now, her words had become a beacon. Poetry isn't just words on paper, Emily told them later, standing beneath the soaring windows that spilled golden light. It's fire. It's rebellion. It's the courage to be seen when the world tries to look away. The club grew. Rumors that once whispered her down the halls now carried her name with respect. Teachers nodded as she passed. Students stopped to listen. Her poem wasn't just a moment anymore. It was a movement. One afternoon, she stood on the stage during the school assembly. The microphone trembled slightly in her grip, but her voice did not. It filled the auditorium, echoing through hearts. "We are more than what others say, more than quiet halls and overlooked moments. We are stories waiting to be told, and together we will tell them." Eyes glistened, hands clapped. The quiet girl had become a thunder. Inside, Emily felt a fierce warmth, a fire that would never be extinguished. She was no longer just the girl who had been overlooked. She was the poet of the school. The auditorium was empty now, but Emily lingered on the stage, fingertips grazing the worn wooden floor. Her poem, the one she'd carried in her chest like a fragile flame, had echoed through these walls just months ago. Now, it lived in every corner of the school. She walked slowly down the hallway, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the tall windows. On the walls, framed copies of her poem had taken their place, delicate script, bold lines. Students passed by, some pausing to read. Some nodded quietly, others whispered, their voices soft but full of reverence. A boy, no older than 12, looked up at her with wide eyes. "Miss Carter," he said, clutching a crumpled notebook. "Your poem, It made me want to write my own. I never thought I could before." Emily smiled gently, the weight of those words settling deep inside her. "You can't," she whispered. "Your voice matters." The halls were no longer silent. The quiet had given way to a hum of stories, of truths shared. Teachers spoke of Emily's courage during staff meetings, not as a moment of luck, but as a spark that had ignited something new. In the library, a plaque was unveiled, engraved with the opening lines of her poem, etched in gold. The principal, his voice steady but thick with emotion, said, "Emily's words remind us all. Greatness often comes from the places we least expect." Emily's heart clenched. The girl who once faded into the background had become the school's beating heart. Later, standing beneath the towering oak in the schoolyard, Emily watched a group of younger students reciting lines from her poem. Their voices wove together, sometimes shaky, sometimes bold, but always alive. She felt the power of the moment. Her words were no longer hers alone. They belonged to everyone who had ever felt unseen. They belonged to the future. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, whispering through the branches as if carrying a secret. Inside, Emily's mind echoed with the truth she'd learned. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths. And sometimes, those truths can change everything. The legacy was no longer just a poem on a page. It was a movement. It was hope. It was the light in the silence. The auditorium had emptied, but the weight of silence hung thick in the air. Emily stood alone under the fading spotlight, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. The crowd had been gone for hours, yet the echo of her words still vibrated through the walls, soft, relentless, impossible to ignore. She traced the worn edges of the stage with trembling fingers, her mind drifting back to every quiet moment she'd lived through. The sidelong glances, the whispered doubts, the empty seats she'd sat in, invisible as the air around her. But here she was, not just seen, but heard. A lone breeze slipped through the cracked window, stirring the pages of her notebook, the very one that had carried her whispered truths when no one else would listen. They overlooked her. The voiceover began, low and steady, breaking the stillness like a gentle drumbeat. But the loudest messages often come from the quietest voices. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the truth of those words settle deep beneath her skin. It wasn't about being the loudest in the room. It was about the strength in silence, the power in restraint. In that silence, she had found her voice. And with it, a force no one could ignore. The camera pulls back slowly, past the empty rows of chairs, the still microphone, the dimming lights, revealing a sea of faces on screens, students and teachers who'd been changed, challenged, and inspired. Sometimes, the most powerful change begins with a whisper that turns into a roar. Emily's eyes opened, fierce and steady. She stepped off the stage, the sound of her footsteps echoing like a heartbeat. Outside, the sky burned pink with dawn, a new day waiting to be written. Her journey was far from over. But now she knew this. True strength lives in the quiet. True courage is found in the unseen. And sometimes, all it takes is one whispered truth to change the world. The screen fades to black. A final line lingers, bold and bright. Listen closely. The quietest voices are often the loudest.